I've got a fun one planned for today. It's an introduction into kayak fishing tournaments. We'll be discussing the kind of gear that you need, what kind of kayak, a big question of, do you really need electronics? Some preparation, and then of course putting together a pattern. Stay tuned and find out here on That Fishing Podcast.
This is Steve Rogers with Steve Rogers Outdoors, and you're listening to That Fishing Podcast. Sit back and enjoy.
Yo, welcome back. Or if you're new, welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, That Fishing Noob. Welcome. So real quick, my voice might sound completely different, or maybe a little bit different, and that is because I'm under the weather. The fun thing with kids is it normally goes from one kid to the other kid to a parent, and then normally to like the other parent, depending on like what happens. So kids to other siblings and kids, or kids to parents, and then all that. All that to say that it is now at me. So it went from my son to like kind of my wife to my daughter, and my daughter to me. So it's great. I'm working through this cough that I have, so there's probably going to be a lot of editing. Before we get into the meat of this episode, a couple little updates. So first update is my buddy Jeremy over at Dadfish Tackle has a new bladed jig that he released over at the East or Eastern Tennessee Fishing Show, or Expo. East Tennessee Fishing Expo, I think that's what it is. So it is called the Lawnmower, and it is great. He's been working on it for a while. He's been messing with different aspects and different little components of it. Finally got that dialed in. It is live. It is available over at dadfishtackle.com. Guys, swing over there, check it out. Maybe buy yourself some. I'm excited. I'm expecting a box sometime soon, and I will be throwing those things out. I am super excited for that. Real quick with that, I like to save money, and I want to save you guys some money too. So if you go over to dadfishtackle.com and you place an order, you can use my code TFN10, Tom Frank Nora 10, for 10% off of your checkout. That'd be great. I'd appreciate it. Also, while I'm on the topic, his soft plastics come scented. So you don't have to worry about like a heavy plastic smell. They come scented. And man, that scent smells good. Second little random thing. So Eco Fishing Shop had put out an ad on their Instagram. They're like, hey, we're accepting applications for pro staff. And I was like, that's interesting. Let me submit an application to be on pro staff. I didn't really think much of it, but I got accepted, which is great. So I am officially part of Eco Fishing Shop's pro staff. I sent them my tournament schedule. They're going to be sending me some stuff, some swag, some stickers to go through and put on the kayak so I can go and rep them. Eco Fishing Shop is great. I ordered my Old Town Sports and PDO 106 through that website, and it arrived at my house like without any kind of issue. It was like wrapped in the plastic bag wrap that Old Town ships their kayaks out of, and then they wrapped it again like a bunch of times with this heavy duty plastic. So, I mean, it was double wrapped. It arrived well. It was great. And here in Texas, I didn't have to pay sales tax on it. So it was just the cost of the kayak, which is fantastic. You guys swing over to Eco Fishing Shop. If for some reason you want to treat yourself to a kayak, I have an affiliate link that I'll have down below. I'd appreciate it if you would consider using that. I'd get a small commission off of a purchase that you would make, and it'd just be a way of supporting, or a different way of supporting my little podcast. I'd appreciate it. Let's get on with the episode. An introduction into kayak fishing tournaments. So, disclaimer, I'm not a crazy guru. I have not fished tournaments for, 10 years plus. I have no crazy experience like that. But I feel like I've learned a lot over the last year of fishing these tournaments. So, we're going to start with what kind of gear you need. The first thing that I purchased was a catch board, and it has to be the catch board brand. I know that there are some trails that are kind of experimenting with allowing different bump boards, but as far as right now, the catch board is the official board that is accepted across the board. So I got a 32-inch catch board, which is a little bit long for the kayak, but I got it on sale. A 26-inch catch board would be just fine. You can order it from Amazon. There's some it's catch board, but it has like a different like sticker on it. I think there's like a HAFA I don't remember if it's like a hunting something, fishing something. That's the one that I have. And there's a couple other ones that are still catchboard, but it's not like it doesn't have catchboard on it. With the catchboard, you're going to also need an ID holder. Depending on, the director, depending on the trail that you're fishing, they might not allow you to go and write the code, the identifier code on your hand. If this is the case, you need an ID holder. So I know some trails that I'll fish, they require a specific identifier card, like their own card. So with that, if I didn't have an ID holder, this thing is just printed on paper and it can be blown around. It's going to get wet because kayak fishing, So an ID holder is something that is super duper important. There's some that are 3D printed that you can put on the catchboard that'll flip up, flip down. If you're familiar with Greg Blanchard, he has one that's like that. I didn't feel like paying the money for it, so I went on Amazon and I found these elastic ID holders, and I literally just slide that up and down my board. Now recently, over Christmas, I got a waterproof one because I've gotten into some like squirrely situations where, I've taken on a little bit of water from waves or wake, or it's just raining and my identifier will be soaked. Kind of thought about this ahead of time. I use an ink that doesn't fade or doesn't smear or run when it gets wet. However, if for some reason I need to go through and change out that identifier when it's soaked, can't do it. Then the entire contents of that holder are going to be like, I can't work with it anymore. The one that I got is off of Amazon. I think it was $9.99 for one. It's the same thing. It's like an elastic band, and I just slide it over the end of the catchboard and slide it up and down. And that has sufficed. I haven't had any issue with any kind of glare or anything like that. My identifier has been super clear and visible in my pictures. One big thing that I will recommend that you get, if you can pull off a trailer for your kayak, then do it. A lot of these tournaments that are going to be big trails are going to be fished out of big lakes. Typically, if it's a big lake, it will have a boat ramp. So down here in Texas, we don't have like a Susquehanna or anything crazy like that. All of ours are just man-made reservoirs. So out of all of the tournaments that I fish here in Texas, they're on big reservoirs and they have boat ramps. So I don't have a trailer, but I do have the next best thing, which is a kayak cart. So once I have my kayak offloaded off the Jeep, I will throw it like while it's still naked onto my cart and then fully load it, and that way I can transport it from the Jeep or wherever I'm parked down to the ramp and get it launched. If you don't have that, and you could be the guy that hogs up the ramp for however long it takes you to go through and unload your kayak, but I really don't recommend that, especially when you start fishing these bigger tournaments. People are going to be launching and getting their kayak in the water. It'd be considerate to not hog up the ramp, to launch quickly, get out of the way, and, open it back up for the next person. Typically for tournaments, they're going to start really, really early in the morning. So having a headlamp is also important, so that way you can see what you're doing. You can fumble around in the dark and you can use the ambient light from your vehicle, but a headlamp helps out so much more with going through and just loading up, rigging up your kayak. You have to have a PFD, and a lot of the rules in these tournaments, they require you to wear a PFD, and it has to be a manual inflate. I don't think that they allow, in some of the trails that I'm around, they don't allow the auto inflate. But with these tournament days, it might be worth it to splurge a little bit more on a more comfortable PFD, because it's going to be at least 8 hours on the water. And, if you are planning on fishing that full 8 hours, comfort needs to be kind of up there on your priority. Because, after 4 hours, if you're battling not only not getting any bites, not getting any fish, but now like your PFD is just rubbing on your neck, your back, and it's just making you that much more uncomfortable, then, your willingness to grind out the rest of the day might be dropping pretty significantly. So spending a little bit more money on a good PFD, a comfortable PFD, I think is worth it. You will need a phone. So with kayak fishing tournaments, the standard of this is CPR. It's catch the fish, take a photo of the fish, and you release the fish. There's no live weigh-in or anything like that. All of the fish are released once a picture is taken of them. So you're going to need your phone for that. And on your phone, you're either going to need Tourney X or Fishing Chaos, which are the two main apps for going and housing these tournaments. I know Fish Donkey is another one. I haven't really used that. The big tournaments I've fished are all on TourneyX or Fishing Chaos. So you're going to need your phone. And then with that, one thing that I do is I will also bring extra power banks, and then I will remember to bring a phone cable, the charger cable. Like I was fishing like a free online tournament. This one time I forgot to time out my phone when it was on the camera, so then my phone ended up dying, and I had no way of charging it. So if I was fishing an actual tournament, I would have lost the opportunity of going through and taking pictures of those fish. Phone, having those apps, TourneyX, Fishing Chaos. I'd recommend that you also get a tether of some sort. So I have this waterproof case that I have tethered to my PFD because I previously lost my phone in a lake, and that was just not fun at all. So now anytime I'm out on the kayak, my phone is in that little case and it's tethered to my PFD. Bring a charging cable and then a power bank to go through and just charge up your phone just in case. And then of course, with any kind of fishing adventure, you need yourself some rod reels, some presentations. So on a typical tournament day, I'm up to I think 8 or 9 rods now, which is pretty wild. And then ultimately I end up only throwing 3. So I would say at least your top 3 most confident presentations. You can bring everything in the kitchen sink because the big thing with tournament fishing is you're throwing whatever at the bass to try to figure out what they're going to hit, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I'd recommend at least your top 3 presentations. Now if you're fishing a smaller tournament, and there's only going to be 10 people, it's like a $5 buy-in, then you can go through and wing one rod. But if you start getting into these like 70, 80, 90, 100 anglers going through and fishing this tournament, I would recommend you bring your confident presentations and then some other ones that are kind of situational, just to have more options out there on the water. So that's a brief overview of the kind of gear that you'll need. Next up is what kind of kayak. So briefly mentioned, if this is a tournament that is on like a pond, or it is not something that's like public water, you have to go fish these giant lakes or giant reservoirs. It's on, this smaller creek, or it's on a pond, or it's on a smaller moving body of water, a smaller river, then I think you can get away with having a paddle kayak. But now if you're stepping up to these larger reservoirs, larger lakes, or big moving water, and you're going to have a lot of water to cover, then I think the bare minimum would be a pedal kayak. And then if you can afford it, a motorized kayak, especially something with spot lock, because once you go through and find a spot, you're able to anchor yourself down and you're good to go, good to fish there. But for these big lakes, having to go and cover water, a pedal kayak as a minimum, I think, is the baseline. I used to fish out of a Lifetime Teton, and covering a big lake is doable, but covering a big lake efficiently and fishing at the same time was really difficult, especially if the wind picked up. So having to do this, paddle dance where I am fishing, making a cast, and then I have to micro adjust myself with my paddle and then go back to fishing, that's a little bit obnoxious. Now with a pedal drive, I can go through and point myself in the direction that I want, and I can almost like manual spot lock myself with just my pedal, so I can focus more on fishing versus having to maintain a position with some paddles. But don't let the kind of kayak you have stop you from fishing your first tournament. If all you have right now is a paddle kayak, my buddy over at Southwest Indiana Outdoors, Chase, he has fished tournaments in his paddle kayak. He's covered like a ridiculous amount of water in his paddle kayak and has done well in his tournaments. So don't let the kind of kayak you have discourage you away from fishing these tournaments. Next up, big question that I had when I fished my first tournament. Do you actually need electronics? So brief backstory, my first tournament I fished, I had my Old Town Sportsman PDL 106. I was out on the water, and I was the only one out there with no electronics. So do you need electronics? I'm going to say yes and no. No, you don't absolutely need electronics. However, it is a really good tool to have and be able to utilize when you're out on the water. So me personally, I had done some research beforehand and I found some areas that I wanted to fish, but I was going back and forth from fishing a spot to looking at my phone to find kind of these contours that I was really trying to hit, and then going and fishing them and then kind of guessing, like, am I fishing this drop right here? Am I fishing, this point that I see, but it's like underwater and it's doing this weird thing where I'm fishing like this little island. Am I actually targeting it, or am I just making blind casts? And I think I was getting around, pretty close in the area, but it wasn't as accurate as it could be. So do you actually need electronics? It is a great tool to use when you're out on the water. So I currently have a Garmin EchoMaps UHD2 73 SV. So this is their 7-inch chart plotter with side view. So it has down view, it has your traditional sonar, it has side view, and it has the Navionics lake maps built into it already. So I can pull up a map, my local reservoir, and I can see contours that were built in. I can see contours without having to go through and like pull up my phone. So I can make waypoints. I can go to my waypoint and fish contours and fish more accurately. And then outside of that, so I'm still learning how to use side scan to its fullest potential, but I have the ability to go through and scan for things beneath the surface. So prior to that, I relied a whole lot on things that I can see above the water, or I can see, all right, here's a point that I can fish above the water, or here's a stump that I can fish that's above the water, or here's a laydown. But with electronics, it opens up a different layer of information that I can't see unless I had that electronic, that unit. That's not to say that you can't find these things without electronics, because you can, but when it comes to fishing tournaments, especially on a new body of water, you're not going to know where these things are. So electronics is a really big tool to go through and help you utilize your time more efficiently while you're out on the water. I think at the bare minimum, one thing that is really helpful to know, helpful information to have out on the water, is depth and water temp. Being able to connect the dots over the course of time of, okay, water temp is around this, it's 60, or it's 45, or it's 50. Being able to connect the dots of, all right, so the water temp is around this degree, it's cold, so then I need to adjust accordingly. Or, oh, I thought the water temp was going to be, in the 50s. It's actually like 65. So I don't need to worry so much about going through and having a finesse presentation all day. I can do some more power and some more fast reactionary type of presentations because the water isn't cold, so these fish shouldn't be lethargic. They should be more active. And then depth. I think being able to see how deep of water or how shallow of water and is another valuable tool to be able to go through and help put together those puzzle pieces to hopefully catch more bass. So if you can go and get electronics, then I would recommend that you do use electronics. How far down the rabbit hole do you go? So now, most of the tournaments that I fish, probably maybe 50% of them in the current trail that I'm in, have live scope. And I have no plans right now for going through and getting live scope. Right now, I'm still enjoying those times when I place higher than somebody who is just going out and scoping. It's a different feeling when I'm like, not only did I beat you, or place higher than this person who is just scoping, but also I feel like I'm better in tune with my surroundings. The idea of looking at a screen and fishing all day doesn't sound that appealing to me. Now, I can't say if I was fishing for like $50,000, I would probably invest in live scope just as a secondary tool. I can go through and scope for fish, but even then, I don't think that would be my only way of catching fish or my only approach towards fishing, because that's just not something that interests me. But again, if you have endless money and you want to go and splurge, you have the opportunity to splurge on electronics without breaking the bank, then by all means go through and get a really good unit that has live scope. Now with it, there is a learning curve to live scope. I know that it's not as easy as you just go pan and then you find the fish and you catch the fish. There's a lot of finesse and a lot of technique that goes into live scope fishing and being proficient with it. Like I said, it's another tool, and tools require some knowledge to be able to use efficiently and adequately. Next up is preparation. So the night before is when I go through and make sure that all of my gear is good to go, that my line is fresh, I have no nicks, no compromised line. I will tie on all the presentations that I'm planning on throwing in the tournament. I will make sure that my bags of soft plastics are squared away and organized, that all of my stuff is charged, my power banks, that my GoPros are good, my SD cards are formatted and set, good to go, my battery is good to go. I have everything situated and packed away. So I am that much more prepared for the actual tournament day. Typically on tournament days, I don't camp unless it's like somewhere really far away. So like I fished Lake Fork for the native Big Bass Power Hour, which was crazy. That was super cool. And even then, I wasn't even planning on really camping. My idea was to like sleep in a parking lot, but my wife was like, "You're not doing that." And then she made me treat myself. So I got a fancy Airbnb. Not fancy, but more fancy than sleeping in, a vehicle. And did that, went that route. But typically I'll go through and load up as much as I can. That includes my crate, my tackle, my rods, electronics, my soft plastics, all the things I'm going to throw, all the things that I think I'm going to need. I'll load that up the night before. And now part of the preparation phase, and this isn't the night before, this is maybe weeks in advance, is research. So one thing that I've been more consistently utilizing is Google Earth. And the reason for that versus just using like Apple Maps satellite view or Google, or not Google Earth, but Google satellite view, is Google Earth provides historical little waypoints. So you can go through and go back in time to, let's say, 2015 and see, oh, the water level is really low and there's actually like 5 laydowns around this point that I was going to fish. Didn't know that. Then you go back into the present time and it's like, okay, this is what the standard like water level, this is what natural pools should be. And yeah, these are where these laydowns are. So my preparation phase will be 2-part. I have Google Earth pulled up so I can see if the water level is low and kind of what things look like around typically the shoreline or the bank. And the second thing is I will look up whatever the lake is, nautical charts. And I will go look up those topographic maps of all of the things and try to find, all right, cool, so here's where riprap is, here's where a steep drop is, here's like, not that we have any here, but like bluff wall. I will go and look up the body of water and kind of just browse around and try to map out mentally, all right, I want to fish this area, or I'm going to make a run to this area and then fish around these areas, and then try to dissect these things from that point. Just trying to go through and put together information beforehand so it's less processing on the water and more, all right, I have a game plan, let me stick to my game plan. So in one of my most recent tournaments, the last tournament actually of last year, I put together a game plan and I stuck to the game plan. And I'm not sour about it, I kind of laugh, but there was this guy that was heading towards this point that I was going to fish, and he beat me to it. So of course I was like, all right, well, first come, first serve. He beat me to it, so I'm going to go, a little bit farther down and fish this rock. While I was moving to fish that rock, I'm looking over at, where I was about to fish, and this guy is pulling up the big bass of the tournament. It was like a 23.5-inch bass, crazy big bass. So a little part of me was like, that was my bass, but no worries. It's a moment like that I appreciate the spot that I chose, because it's like, oh, so this guy, not only did he catch a big bass, but he also placed number 1 in that tournament. So that kind of was a confidence booster to me. I picked the right area and I had a game plan and I stuck to it. I told myself beforehand, I'm going to thoroughly pick apart this area. I'm going to stay in this area and I'm not going to make crazy runs. So little random thing. And at Lake Fork, I made a crazy huge run, which was a huge waste of time. I'm not motorized, I'm just pedal power, but that run was like overall maybe 45 minutes, maybe more, of just covering water time without really fishing anything. So go through, do some research, look up some nautical charts, dissect an area, and come up with a game plan. Once you come up with that game plan, stick to it. Or you can just, go through and roll the dice on it. But with that, kind of gather more information over time. So have, like 3 things in an area. So when I'm looking for an area, I'm looking for something that's pretty diverse within as small of an area as possible, because being on a kayak, I can't cover water like a bass boat. I can't make these full lake, runs and fish, 5, 6, 7 hot spots in just one day and just bounce back and forth between these hot spots. I'm in a kayak, so I have to stop and really dissect an area, or run the risk of wasting time going and just making a run somewhere. In that research phase, I'm trying to find also what has the most variety of water within the smallest area. So if it has laydowns, if it has, a pretty steep drop from the bank, if it has rock, if it's near the dam, if it has good points, if there's like underwater islands, those are all things that I'm taking into consideration whenever I'm trying to pick a spot to go through and fish. I like a lot of variety, but then also you gotta fish to your strengths. I really like fishing riprap. So if I can find riprap, I'm going to fish that. Another good thing to bring would be some cash, because there's not going to be people working the guard shacks or the entry shacks when you're launching for these tournaments. It's going to be too early. So I know around here, it's kind of like an honor system where you go fill out an envelope, you drop your cash into a little drop box, and then you go proceed to fish. Be someone of integrity. Go through and drop, the $5, the $7 into that, and just pay those ramp fees. And that leads us into the next segment, putting together a pattern. So if you bring out 3 rods or 9 rods, the fun thing and maybe not so fun thing about competitive fishing in these tournaments is once you find a fish that hits something, cool. You now have yourself a fluke. Once you find that area, so little word of wisdom, if you find a fish in a specific spot, don't move very far from that spot. Make a cast, 10 feet to the left, 10 feet to the right, because where that one fish is, there are typically more fish in that area. So let's say you catch a fish, you release it, let's say you're throwing a football jig out. Okay, that's interesting, Make a couple more casts. You catch another fish on in. Well, now you have a coincidence. You're like, okay, this is one step away from developing a pattern. So same thing, you're still in that area, you're making the same casts, you're going through cast, another fish. Okay, 3 fish on one presentation, whatever it is, that is what you're throwing for the rest of the day. And that is the pattern. Let's say you're going out and throwing out an underspin, a chatterbait, whatever it is, a wacky. You get a hit, okay, that's interesting. You got yourself a fluke. You get another hit on the same thing, around the same area. Got a coincidence, that's interesting. You get another hit, you've got a pattern. Once you've got your pattern, you're set. That is what you're throwing. And in that area, like you can go through, cover more water, maybe, 30 yards left and right from where that initial fish was caught. And then you can go through, and if they're still not hitting, reset. You can cover a little bit of water, but don't get too far away from there because fish will come and go. And then it's more or less going through and replicating that pattern. Were they holding tight to reeds? And if there's a ton of reeds, it's like, well, what attracted these fish towards these areas? Was it, a transition where it went from reed to just, maybe pea gravel, or reeds to it just stopped and it's open bank? Was it an area where there's rocks, riprap, and then, a steep drop? Going through and finding out, recognizing that pattern, and then replicating it, and throwing that presentation is the key, is golden, is money. And that could be kind of the downside to tournament fishing, is quote unquote it being boring, because now you're throwing out one thing when you have 8 more things to throw. But that's also the fun thing, because once you get a fish and you get a couple fish in a tournament setting, it's a different type of rush if you are a competitive person like that. And I guess quick disclaimer, you don't have to only throw that one thing. You can still change it up to, your top 3 just to see. But more often than not, when you find that pattern, do your best to stick to what works. And then don't leave fish to find fish. If you found fish in an area, trust that for some reason these fish like this area. And even though the bite might die down for a little bit, trust that, okay, I found fish in this area. There should be fish in this area. Maybe there's going to be more that are coming through it. But trust that you found something good before you give up on it and you say, all right, well, I'm just going to risk it and, make a 40-minute run somewhere else. Try your best to not leave fish to find fish, which is a lot easier said than done, because I've been there where I'm like, the bite shot down here, they're not here. And then the mental game, I have 2 hours left to fish. I can go make a run over here. It's going to take 20 minutes. Maybe there's going to be fish here. I don't know unless I try. Do your best to just chill out, breathe. Don't leave fish to find fish. But hopefully this helps you get your feet wet with kayak fishing tournaments. But as a quick recap, going over the gear, having a catch board, ID holder, a cart or a kayak trailer, headlamp, PFD, your phone with the proper apps, a tether of some sort, and of course, your top 3 confidence presentations, and then some cash for the ramp. And what kind of kayak? You can definitely go out and fish tournaments with a paddle kayak. It's just not going to be as easy or convenient as a pedal or a motorized kayak. But don't let the kind of kayak you have stop you from going and fishing your first tournament. Do you need electronics? Not really, but if you can afford them and it doesn't break the bank, doesn't break your budget, then it's another great tool to have while on the water. Now, does this include live scope? For me, no, not right now. But if you can also swing live scope, there are a lot of people that are using it right now. And if that's something that, like a type of fishing that you can enjoy, by all means, go for it. Preparation, doing some research ahead of time, pulling up Google Earth and pulling historical data from the lakes that you're going to fish or the bodies of water that you're going to fish. And then also looking up nautical charts for that specific lake that you're going to fish. Researching, finding an area, and then developing a game plan, sticking to that game plan. Before the morning of, if you are like me and you commute out to these tournaments, fish, and then go home, load up as much as you can the night before or sometime before, so that way you have that much less to load in the morning. And then double check all of your line. It would be really sad for you to lose a potential like big bass fish or a keeper, your 5th fish that would have got you your limit and maybe gotten you placed. And once you're out there, taking it easy, sticking to your plan, and putting together a pattern. Don't leave fish to find fish. Once you got your fluke, your coincidence, and then your pattern, you're good to go. Should be. But don't leave fish to find fish. Go grind it out. And hopefully you can go through, catch a limit, and hopefully place. Fun thing, this is just, things that I've learned over the course of fishing tournaments. Fun random thing, I've yet to place in an official, like a big tournament. I've done some online tournaments and I've placed top 10, I think in like 5 of them, but I don't really count those compared to an in-person with like in-person awards, big tournament day. So the highest that I've come to getting some money is, I think I was 12 out of 64. That's the highest I've placed. So I've not placed in the top however many spots to go through and get money. And I'm hoping to do that sometime soon. But thank you for joining me on this podcast episode. I appreciate it. You guys leave a review, leave some comments, leave some feedback. I would appreciate it. But that'll be it for this one. I hope that you are able to go fishing. And if you are fishing, I hope you're able to catch a big one. But I'll catch you on the next one. Tight lines. God bless.